Okay, we are back in Pirkei Avot, and we're in the second chapter. If you take a look at if you take a look in the chat, you'll find a copy of you'll find a link at least to the text. Um, you'll find a link to the text in Safari, and you can just click on that. You'll have that right in front of you. And if you have this version, which is the one I like, at least this one I like today, is the Koran Pirkei Avot, and that's page 34. And so it's the second. Again, um, oh no, poor Azad, she still can't hear me. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I hope you figure it out. Okay, because yeah, I hope you figured it. Not for my sake, but because it's good stuff. Okay. So our last one was great. Our last mission was great. Um, it was about how you can't trust government. If you if you've been watching the news, um, then I don't really have to say anything more. But okay. So now we're continuing, and we are this is Rabban Gamliel, who was the son of Yudah Nasi, and as he used to say, he used to say, he says, do his will like your will, okay? So that he may do your will as if it is his. Nullify your will before his will, so that he may set aside the will of others for the sake of yours. So this to me is sort of like a Zen koan, you know. It has a sort of has a beautiful, first of all, as you can hear, it has a beautiful rhythm to it, right? It has a beautiful rhythm to it. Um, uh, almost a kind of poetic rhythm. And that's, of course, a lot of alliteration, repetition of vocabulary, and the idea is deep. So do his will as if it were yours. So do God's will as as if, right? As if it were your will, as if it were exactly what it is that you want. So that you may do your will so as if it were his. So he may do your will as if it were his. Because now you and the creator are one in your desire. You're one in what you want out of the world. You're on the same page. So that he can do your will as if it is his. Why? Because it is his will. Set aside your will for the sake of his. Okay, so you should be batel. It's beautiful. It's not just setting aside. It's to nullify something. Is to nullify something. Is to make it negligible. So make your will negligible. Make your will nullified for the sake of his, that he may set aside the will of others for the sake of yours. Because now, God's will is always going to be accomplished, right? God's will is always going to be accomplished. Um, and so if you are completely in tune with God's will, then that means that your will always prevail. Now, the problem with this, and I say this honestly, is that it sounds a little bit magical, right? It says, well, get yourself in tune with God's will and nullify your will, and other people will do what you want. I remember hearing a rabbi once. Uh, Okay, I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to embarrass anybody. A rabbi, he's a very well known rabbi, a very good teacher, and he was talking about his spray. He said he had the word he was trying to translate, I think it was the word hashpah, which means influence. But he translated it as spray, which struck me as very weird because I kept thinking of male cats. So he said, I have an incredible influence because I have because my will is in tune with God's will. I have, this spray that can influence people. So it says like, I can, you I mean, the example he gave was so bonkers. I don't know what to say. But, I go into a taxi cab. I go to a taxi cab I asked the taxi driver to take me to some place, um, and he takes me to that place. He doesn't even charge me because my spray is so powerful, right? Because my will is in tune with God's will, and so His will is nullified before mine. I do not think at all that that's what this means. Okay, just saying that, that's a possible misinterpretation, and it's a little bit of a weird one, right? That you're going to have some sort of magical power over other people. But I think that when we're in tune with God's will, when we sort of nullify ourselves to God's will, then other people are going to be doing our will because that's God's will. Okay, thoughts, rescue. I
Yeah,
feel like
I also have an awful lot of problems with these verses, and I'm coming up with desperate explanations because I don't want to just say the text is beyond me, and or the text is plainly wrong, both of which are real, one of which is embarrassing and one of which is arrogant. Um, so what I'm thinking about it is, to what extent are we um are we actually seeing a reversal here where it says you make God's will like your will so that God will make God's will like his will? Maybe what he's saying is that if you make your will in accord with God so that that becomes your will, then you are the reward, as it were, the consequence is that you are now acting in accord with God's will,
right,
which is a good thing in and of itself. And
right.
similarly, to some extent, where it says nullify your will um, to His will, so that He will nullify the will of others to your will. That can be when you know when you're essentially joining the community of the people who are doing God's will when you nullify your will um, to others. Um, I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm-
that's. I mean, I think I came as close as I'm gonna. I think I came as close as I'm gonna get. Um, the idea of being mivatel, to nullify your will. I have a friend who often says to me, I trust in God. She says, I trust in God. I trust in God. I trust in God. She says this to me all the time. And I always answer her, and God trusts in you. You know, it's I'm always hesitant about throwing everything on God. There's a decision, right? Decision we have to make, and the person will say, "Well, I'm just going to trust in God." Well, that's really good, except for the fact that God is trusting in you, right? He gave you free will, right? He gave you free will. He gave you certain capacities, and He put you in this particular, and He is in charge of many of the circumstances that put you in this position. So He's trusting you to make the decision. And now you're sort of saying, okay, no, I'm gonna. So I'm nervous about that a little bit. But if a person could really be Mivato, if you could really nullify your will to God's will, that would be a different thing. I think pretending to nullify your will to God's will could be very dangerous. Um, I don't know. Have to think about this some more. Let's go to the next one, and which is also very just a little bit difficult. Okay. I think in the Safaria, this is all part of the same Mishnah, which doesn't make sense to me. It's clearly, I think, another Mishnah. Hillel said, so now we've even changed rabbis. Al tifrosh mina tzibur. So there are a couple pieces of this. I'm going to take it piece by piece. So al tifrosh mina tzibur. Do not separate yourself from the community. So this is a really difficult one. Very often this is used um, as a uh, as an advertisement for groupthink. You know, this is like, eh, don't separate yourself from the community. Don't think or do anything different from from everybody else in the community, right? And there are some kind of there are some sort of cute halakhic arguments about this. You know, some people have this custom, and then some people have that custom. And if your custom is different from the people around you, should you do it or should you not do it? Right? Al tifrosh b'nei tzibor, don't do what's different from other people. That's one discussion. And I actually don't think that they're using it as this as a kind of as a legal dictum. They're using it as kind of like a as kind of something to fortify a legal position. I don't think that has like legal force. Um, but if you take a look at the commentary, I mean, and almost all of them agree that al tivrosh min tzibor means, and when I say that, of course, I don't mean to limit the meaning to that, but their kind of take on it is al tivrosh means don't don't disassociate yourself from the concerns of the community. Don't, right? So if they're suffering, right, you should be empathizing with their suffering. If they're happy, you should be empathizing with their happiness, right? So you should be emotionally involved. Don't be emotionally distanced from the community. And the word for community here, tzibor, has a very localized meaning. Tzibor really is not just it's not community in the broad sense. So some people say al tifrosh min tzibor. So if you're using that as a bludgeon, which very as I said it often is, okay, as a bludgeon, it's like okay, all Orthodox Jews are doing this, right? Everybody this year is wearing this style hat, right? So wear this style hat. Al tifrosh bin tzibor from, as we say in Yiddish, you know, do like the Welt does, the world, right? The world never means the whole world. It means a small section of the world, right? That matters. Okay? So um, so those small section of people do like they do. That's how that's understood. But Sibor, right? This word for community is community in the most narrow sense, right? It's the people who are directly around you. If you want to be cute, there's it's some say that Tzibor is an acronym for Tzaddik, Benoni, and Rasha. Tzaddik, righteous people, right? Benoni, middling people, Rasha, bad people, which is pretty much every community, right? Most communities are composed of a few good people, a lot of people, and some people who are pretty rotten. Okay, so we have that's a community. So al tifrosh min tzibor, don't emotionally. I'm going to take it like that. Don't emotionally distance yourself from the people around you. Yes, Larry.
Um, I'm thinking when you start talking about the fact that Seaboard is a very small community, this statement suddenly became a lot more relevant to me because at the moment, political passions in the US are running very high. And there is the question of to what extent am I to fracture my friend's community and say that the people who are supporting political positions that I considered to be morally wrong
Mm,
have to be expelled from my community and say I'm not in concert with you anymore. And so do
right.
not separate yourself from the community could be taken to mean that the answer to that is no, don't throw people out, but work on them. To expand the scope slightly, there was a popular saying during the Vietnam War, there was "My country, right or wrong," and
Yes.
the full version of that I was taught by my liberal teachers was "My country, right or wrong." When right, to be kept right. When wrong, to be set right. So the idea is that you never say, "Oh, they're just wrong. I have nothing to do with them." If you're part of the group, then if the group is going wrong, you have a responsibility to engage and try and make things go better, rather than having the luxury of simply walking away and saying, "I don't need to care about these people. They're all just wrong."
Yeah, what is very interesting. I mean, my country, right or wrong, um, your expansion of that kind of reminds me of what the Talmud says about Ezer Kenegdo, right? Where Eve is called Adam's helpmeet. This is a weird word, which means literally helper who is against him, right? And so the Talmud explains that she's his helper when he's right, and she's against him when he's wrong, right? That's the appropriate position of a partner. And so yeah, a community is a partnership. And so yeah, I think I think there is definitely, I mean, yeah, I'm with you on that. I feel like there isn't this idea that, listen, the people who are around you, who are your tzibor, your immediately community, don't push them away. Don't push them away. Don't completely separate yourself from them. I have a feeling like that. My country, your country, right or you know, your country, right or wrong, is going to make a big comeback. I'm just feeling like that. It's going to make a comeback. ואל תאמין בעצמך עד יום מותך. Do not be sure of yourself until the day you die. Um, my wife doesn't know this Mishnah, but she's constantly telling me, do you believe yourself? Don't believe yourself. So, so, uh, so do not be sure of yourself until the day you die. Like don't. And the example there's an example with Talmud of I can't remember who it is Shimon Tzaddik or some some great sage, and he turns into a heretic, like, and he's like 100 years old or something. He turns into a heretic. You know, the- you know, you always have to be. Um, oh my goodness. Okay, thank you for that quote. Wow, Lenny. Okay. Um, so. You should never trust. You shouldn't trust yourself. It's interesting. There's a discussion in the Talmud about imagine you have an animal, you have an ox, right? So if that ox gores somebody, okay, if that ox gores somebody, you have to pay. The ox goes and hits somebody. You have to pay money, right? You have to pay money for the guy, but you don't have to put the ox. You don't necessarily have to put the ox to death and so forth. But it's a different case if that ox is badly behaved, okay, and people come to you and they say that ox you have is a very badly behaved ox. And I'm warning you that you need to take special care to make sure that ox never goes near anybody. Okay? If that happens, then the situation is much different. Then you have to pay a lot more, and the ox has to be killed, and it goes on. So then they ask the question about human beings, right? Do human beings, right? If a human being does damage, do they have to be warned? And the Talmud says no. A human being is muad olam, is always warned, meaning to say, know that you are dangerous. Okay? Human beings are the most dangerous things in the planet. Okay? We are extremely dangerous. And that's something you should know about yourself, right? It's interesting, by the way, just to emphasize that point. To emphasize that point, I think, let me check if this is true. I think it's true. Um, I think Pirkei Avot, I think it's in Nezikin. It's actually in the section of the Mishnah that deals with damages. Right? Well, why is it in the section of the Mishnah that deals with damages? Because we're talking about limiting the damage of a human being. To be a better person is to limit the damage that you do in the world, right? So you are warned. So don't think that just because you look at yourself and say, "Oh, I'm a good person. I can never do anything bad. I could never." Don't believe in yourself, right? Don't believe in yourself. That check yourself, right? Always check what you're doing. Don't believe in your own righteousness. Al tadin et chavercha ad shetagia limkomo, right? Do not judge your fellow until you have stood in his place, right? Don't judge another person until you've been in their position, which really means almost never, because because truthfully, right? The conditions that other people, first of all, we almost never, if we almost never know the conditions of another person's life. We may know some tiny little piece, okay, but unless we really know them well, we really don't know much. You see very often, my experience is there's a couple, right? And they're just, oh, they're the cutest couple. They're so nice. They're so gracious and wonderful. And they're so in love and they're kissy, 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 and it's amazing. And then like 3 weeks later, they announce they're getting divorced. He said, wait, what? What? How, how did that happen? He said, because why? Because you didn't know. Because there were a lot of things, there are a lot of there are a lot of things you didn't know. We don't know a lot about other people's positions. And so we look at their behavior and we look at the things that they do and we judge, but we have no idea what they've been through. We have no idea what their motivations are. And when we try to make guesses, our guesses are often wrong. So until you come into their situation, you can't judge. Um, ואל תאמר דבר שאי אפשר לשמוע, שסופו יישמע. Says, don't say anything that cannot be understood in the hope that eventually it'll be understood, right? Don't don't say something. Um, yeah, it's exactly right. As they said, people's lives are like onions. They have so many layers to them. Exactly. I mean, there's so many things going on inside of a person that we can't see until we've been in their precise situation, right? Until we've had their parents, which we could never have. Until we've had their parents and grown up where they grew up and had their education and had their experiences, right? We have no right to judge. Um, now that doesn't, again, as in the words of my rabbi, there's no mitzvah, no commandment to be stupid. So obviously, if somebody is dangerous or somebody is hurtful, okay. So you deal with that situation as it is, but there's no point in making a judgment. You do what you do need to do to protect yourself. Um, but you don't have to be judgmental. Don't condemn them for things that you can't possibly know. You don't know and and by the way, this lim komo, their place, it's like the Arabic word makam, right? So it means not just place, but their state, right? Their kind of mental, spiritual, emotional condition, which you can't possibly know. Okay, so don't say something that cannot be understood at once in the hope that it will be understood, right? This, I think, is I've always never quite understood this. Um, I'm not sure that this word lishmoa can mean understand. שאי אפשר לשמוע, שסוף לשמע. It can be understood or just heard, but I guess it does mean understand here. Like, don't say things in cryptic, clever ways, right? The point is not to be cryptic and clever. The point is to actually make your point, right? Sometimes people, want to be super clever, and especially if you're talking about things which are important. Um, they want to be super clever. They want to say things in some, clever, cool way. Um, knowing that it's not going to be understood. And maybe somebody later is going to go, oh, that's what he meant. You know, and he says, no, that's not a way to do it. Now, by the way, he switches. He switches to Aramaic, or he kind of so, which is interesting. Um, and you'll see why. So Al Tomar, don't say likshepan eshne shema lo tipane. So don't say I will study when I have the time, for you may never have the time. So don't put off tomorrow what you can do today, right? Don't say, and of course he says that in Aramaic because he's being, I think he's being a little bit playful because people spoke Aramaic, right? So he's saying, the guy says, yeah, I'll study when I have time, I'll study, yeah, when I retire. You know, yes, I'll study when I retire. I'm going to take, you know, I'm gonna be taking all these courses when I retire. And then of course, yeah, good. First of all, you may not retire. Larry's going, that's me. That's me. Right. And me too. So, I mean, some of us actually do that, but some people actually do that. But some people, they put up and they don't ever, of course, maybe you're not going to have the opportunity to retire, God forbid. Or maybe you're, or maybe you're not going to have the strength, or maybe you're not going to have the mental facility, maybe whatever, or life is going to get, busy for you, um, in some way. So you should take the opportunities that you have to study whenever you can, right? To study, even if it's just a little bit, it was just a little bit every day, even if it's just, even if, and, you know, and to make sure that you do it, but it also applies, I think, not only to that, but to a lot of other things, you know. Um, I can make a confession here. There's a gentleman in our community who's very ill, and I I have I don't like hospitals. They give me the willies. I just don't like them. I hate hospitals. I hate rehab centers. I hate anything that smells like a hospital in any way. And I've been putting off going to see this guy. Today, Bezrat Hashem, saying in public, I'm going to go see him. But I've been putting it off. And I know that that's been very, very bad for me. I know it's been very bad for me. Because I keep putting it off. Tomorrow, maybe tomorrow, yeah. And there's always something. I mean, I can always find a reason, not to do something which is difficult for me. And I can always, for something which is easy for me and which I like to do, I can always find a reason to do it, right? I can clear my calendar, right, in 2 seconds. Okay? If you told me that there was a great kosher Italian restaurant that just opened up in Washington, D.C., okay, my calendar would magically clear out, okay, and I would be slurping pasta in 10 minutes, okay? Um, but if you ask me to go to the hospital, a week goes by, 2 weeks go by. Oh, tomorrow's not so good because it's hot out, it's cold out, it's raining out. It's okay. Enough said. Hu haya omer. He used to say, "Ein bor yirei chet." That's a great word. You can use this one in English. Bore is literally a bore. Literally is an empty pit. It's a great insult, but it doesn't work all that well in English, I don't think. But boor, I don't know where the English word boor comes from, um, but it's the same word. So an uncouth person or a boor cannot be somebody who is sin-fearing. Um, so a person for a person for a person to have a proper appreciation. And by the way, the word here, yireh chet is like a very light word for sin. Okay, it's a light word for sin. Um, it's a We had it in last week's parsha. If you noticed in last week's Torah portion, when the people go up on the mountain, what they when they refuse to enter the land, right, and then decide, okay, we're going to go up, we're going to fight, and even though God said no already, right, they say chatanu, right? Oh, we did bad, right? So it means we made a mistake. So it says a person who is uncouth, a person who's a boor, is not going to be able to be careful about making mistakes. Not going to have a proper appreciation of the consequences of their errors. Um, v'lo ama aretz chasid, and a person who is an ignoramus. The this phrase "ama aretz," we're going to as translated as ignoramus, is a very interesting phrase. It occurs a bunch of times in Pirkei Avot. So am means people. So for my Muslim friends, related to the word ummah, people. Um, am haaretz, aretz, if you know Arabic, ard, right? So people of the land, people of the land. Um, and the rabbis use this to refer to the common folk, right? To the uneducated. And there's a lot of and sometimes they mention them with a lot of hostility. Like there's a line in the Talmud that says um, that if you give an Amar it's half a chance, he'll bite off. I forget which part of the body it was, but he'll bite off one part of the body of the scholars or something like that. There's this kind of hostility between the common people and the rabbis, right? Maybe it's a kind of jealousy, maybe it's or maybe it's what we see today, the kind of resentment of the ivory tower. We have in the words of J.D. Vance, the university professors are the enemy. So maybe there was something of that, a kind of a populism in those um Thank you very much for that. That's great. Cleavon Little says, the name of Harav Mel Brooks, the common clay of the New West. Yes, exactly. So these are the normal people. And it says they can't be pious. A Hasid means not literally, because literally it just means somebody who's super kind. That's a weird. Uh, but Hasid in this context means somebody who is pious in the sense that they go above and beyond the letter of the law, that they're particularly scrupulous, not in the unhealthy sense, um, um, and extra, and they're in the religious realm extra. Um, so a person who doesn't know anything obviously can't do that, right? If you don't know where the edge of the law is, you can't go beyond the edge of the law. You have to know where the edge is. It says, this is a great one. It says, Lo habayshan lamed. A person who is shy cannot learn, right? A Baishan is not just shy. Somebody who's Baishan, really, like Busha, is also full of shame. A person who's full of shame, a person who doesn't think enough of themselves to be able to ask a question, it's harder for them to learn, right? Because learning is all about being able to ask questions and being able to kind of take in information for yourself by picking it apart and asking questions and so forth. And so it's much harder for a person who is shy to learn. V'lo hakabdam lamed says which somebody a person who is impatient, nor can a person who is impatient teach, right? Which it's interesting that those, if you look, that's all part of one thing, because there's a vav there. It says v'lo bashan lamed v'lo hakabdan melamed, um, and a, a a shy person cannot learn, and and an impatient person, a hothead cannot teach. So they're related to each other, right? So the worst thing for a person who's shy is a teacher who's angry, right? So a teacher who's angry and aggressive and you know, as somebody once said to me, the problem with teaching is that it attracts a lot of bullies, right? Sometimes bullies become teachers because I mean, where else can you boss people around like that? You know, in what universe, can you say to everybody, sit down and shut up? No, I could go and do that in my synagogue. I'm the gabbai, right? I can go and do that, and they just laugh at me, right? They're just kind of they're not even going to look at me. But if I do that in my classroom, right, everybody sits down, they're quiet. And for a person who's a bully, that's a great thing. But it says that person can't teach like that. Okay, a person, right? Teaching requires calm and patience and appreciation, even of the baishan, even of the person who's shy, right? The person who's shy can open up, right, with somebody who's kind and patient, but they can't open up with somebody who's a kamta, with somebody who's um, angry. V'lo kol marbe schora makim. And it says, and anybody who increases, who was, I like the translation better, overoccupied in business does not become wise. Right? If you spend all your time worrying about you know, if you're a day trader, right? You spend your entire day in front of the computer, watching your fortunes rise and fall. Chances are you're not going to have much time to develop wisdom. Makom she'en anashim yishtadel liyot ish. In a place where there are no human beings, strive to be a human being.
Wait,
Uh,
can I
what?
say something?
Yes, please.
When it says if you engage too much in business, you can't become wise. I think what it means is that the business mentality is very pragmatic.
Mm,
What works in the moment, in the instant, and wisdom requires a longer arc.
yes.
So if you develop a mentality, what we call now is like a transactional mentality, which is what makes you successful in business, that short circuits your ability to take the longer perspective that you need to be wise.
That's a very nice point. It's a very nice point. We say tzaddik, tzaddik in a barosho. A tzaddik, a righteous person has eyes in their head. So they understand that as being has their eyes on the beginning, which means that they're understanding from the beginning what can happen at the end. And you're right, that is not necessarily right. That's not necessarily the business mentality, which is more pragmatic, more immediate. And then down the line, we have to, if we have to kick the can down the road further down the line, we'll do that, right? But that's a great point. That's a very good point. And I'll end with this last one. Maybe we'll begin with it too. Is makom she'en hashim mishtadel liot ish. In a place where there are no, he translates worthy people, strive to be worthy. Well, a place where there's no human beings. You know, this is ish, the word ish. Now, there are many words for people. We've talked about that before. Right, thank you. So that's where I'm going. The word ish doesn't mean just like a human being. The world, Rabbi Nachman said it also. He said, the world doesn't need more people, okay? It needs more good people, okay? It needs more good people. More people we can make without any problem. We all know how to do it, okay? But making more good people is much more difficult. So it says if you're in a place where nobody is being a good person, where nobody is being a mensch, that's the Yiddish word for it. I highly encourage you to use that if you're not Jewish, use that in your everyday conversations. Um, you'll you'll confuse everybody. Um, just yell at your spouse, be a mensch. I highly recommend that. But even if nobody else around you is being, and this is, this is a very fundamental thing, you know. Never say you're, in the words of the Chazon Ish, great rabbi from Israel at the turn of the century, says, or a little bit after that, um, never say that I'm the only one. Say I'm the first one. Right? Never say when you're doing something good, don't say I'm the only one. Say I'm the first one. So if you have to be the first one, be the first one. But even if you see that there's no, so which is really interesting because we started out with Al tifrosh min hatzibor. We started out with don't separate yourself from the community, and then we end with, right? Even if your community is not being, if your community is not being worthy, you be worthy. So let that sink in. So thoughts before I kick everybody out? Okay. If you have any ideas during, please just contact me, share your ideas with me. I do want to hear. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a beautiful day. Tomorrow I'm going to be back with Duties of the Heart. And please join me and invite your friends to join me, invite you know, your enemies, friends of your enemies, the enemies of your enemies, people you find on the street, under bridges, wherever you may find them, bring them in and we'll learn together. So, bye.